Hey guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today I am bringing you some science fiction recommendations. So I have done a sci-fi recommendation video before. I will link it up here for you guys if you would like to check it out. But since then, I have read some more science fiction that I really love. I've discovered recently that I do actually really like science fiction. I don't read as much of it as I would like to. I still have plenty of books and plenty of series on my TBR that I am just desperate to read. So if you guys want a sci-fi TBR, I guess I could do that. Let me know down in the comments. I think the thing about sci-fi for me is that, as I'm sure you guys have heard on this channel a million times before, I really like fantastical stories that are rooted in logic. So any sci-fi that is heavily science-based, or just because the nature of sci-fi means that it has to be rooted in science, meaning that it is quite logical, I just really love it, and I love finding out how everything works and just really mentally getting into the story. But before we get started, I would just like to mention that this video has once again been very kindly sponsored by Skillshare. If you guys are unfamiliar with Skillshare, they are an online learning platform that have thousands and thousands of classes that cover a very wide range of topics, including things like illustration, photography, journaling, and business management. Now, the class that I would like to recommend to you guys today is something that is maybe a little bit different than what you would expect from me, but it is Creative Writing for All, a 10-day journaling challenge taught by Emily Gold. So I used to write quite a lot before I started my channel. I was working on a novel. I love to write through school. I've always enjoyed writing. However, my schedule just does not allow for it anymore. I struggle with things like creative ideas, but I do have very vivid dreams, and sometimes a dream will spark some inspiration. So recently I've been working on some ideas and I decided that I wanted to start writing them down. However, it has been such a long time since I have attempted to write anything. I'm a little bit rusty and I'm a little bit out of practice, so I just wanted a relatively quick, simple exercise to kind of get me back into the practice of being able to write again. So this class by Emily Gold is pretty much a 10-day workshop where she helps you get your creative juices flowing and then shows how you can use this simple exercise in your work in progress and how you can take inspiration from the little things in life. So it's pretty much exactly what I need right now. So Skillshare is not only extremely accessible and extremely useful, it is also incredibly affordable, with an annual subscription costing less than $10 per month on average. Now, obviously, I understand that signing up to a subscription-based service can be a little bit daunting, which is why I am happy to let you guys know that for a limited time, if you click on the link at the top of my description box, you will get completely free access to Skillshare Premium for a 2-month period. During this 2 months, you can sample as many or as little classes as you would like to, just to find out whether Skillshare is right for you. I've been working with Skillshare for a very long time now, and I definitely would recommend their service. So the link is there in my description box if you feel so inclined to take me up on this offer. So getting into the recommendations, I have 5 books to recommend to you guys today. 4 of them are series. I have read all of the books in all 4 series I'm going to be recommended, so I do recommend the series as a whole. 3 of them are science fiction and 2 of them are dystopian, which is a subgenre of science fiction. So getting into it, I'm going to start off with one of the dystopians, which is the only book of these 5 that I do not own, and also the only standalone, and that is I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. So when I started getting more into sci-fi, I wanted to check out the Sci-Fi Masterworks collection. Sadly, this is still the only book from the Sci-Fi Masterworks collection that I've read, but I did thoroughly enjoy it and I was very surprised. So this is the book that the movie I Am Legend featuring Will Smith was based on. However, they are very different. In this book, we follow a man who has found himself surviving in the midst of the zombie apocalypse. It's quite mundane in a lot of ways. It follows his daily life and his very mundane daily routine of survival. So he has a regular pattern to his days, but he is also searching for the cure to this zombie virus that has claimed his entire family and also the majority of the world. Now, something that really struck me about this book is that it is very emotional in a way that I did not expect it to be. You really feel how worn down this man is by what is happening around him. Loneliness is a really big theme in this book. He has nobody to talk to, and you do really see the effects of that. He grows close to animals in this book. If you've seen I Am Legend, sadly the same kind of thing transpires. However, it's not as emotional in the book as it is in the film, thank God, because that would have broken me. But something else that I enjoyed about this that I did not expect was the whole aspect of looking for the cure. Now, I really expected this to be more of a horror, and while it does contain zombies, so it could stray over into the horror category a little bit, this is predominantly about him searching for a cure and him as a person, how he is dealing with this. There are zombie attacks in it, but it's not in a horror sense. It is more of a clinical scientific perspective. The only real negative I have about this book is the end. The movie I Am Legend doesn't end great, and the book doesn't end great either. This is a very short book. I think it's definitely under 300 pages, but it's possibly under 200. But I did feel like it was a very well constructed novel. I would have liked it to continue because where the character finds himself at the end was very interesting to me, but I do like it as a novel. It's not super plot driven, I want to say. It's almost like a slice of life science fiction, like how does this guy go about in this environment, but I just found it fascinating. And if you have been looking to get into more classic science fiction, or you want to read older science fiction, I would recommend I Am Legend, because as well as everything else that I've mentioned, the writing is also extremely accessible. Now moving on to the other dystopian, which is actually more of a utopian, and that is Scythe by Neil Shusterman. So this is a young adult trilogy that takes place in a world where people don't die. So humanity, science, technology, medicine have advanced far enough that humans just cannot die. There is no death, there's no disease, there's no famine, every illness has been cured, and the only way that you can die is if a scythe gleans you, because in this perfect futuristic society there is still one problem, and that is overpopulation. So in this series we follow Citra and Rowan, who are apprentice scythes. Now every scythe has their own way of going about things. So when you are an apprentice, you are taught by a mentor, but the way that you go about doing your job is completely up to you. Every scythe has their own kind of flair. An example of this is that some may choose to only kill by poison. Some may choose to approach their victims and give them 24 hours to settle their affairs. Some research the most common ways that people died back when people did die. So if 10% of the population died in car accidents, then 10% of the people that this scythe gleans would die in a car accident. So the thing about this series that I really loved is the world. It's like Neil Shusterman thought of everything in this world. There are so many different possibilities. I do believe that this world has opportunities for spin-offs. I don't think I would like to see a continuation of this series, but maybe a prequel of how everything came about, or just more stories set in this world. I would really, really love to see. I also think that this series has great potential for a TV adaptation, once again just set in the world as opposed to following the actual events of the series, because I was fascinated and I could have read many more books just set in this world that Neil Shusterman has created. One of my favorite characters in this series is the Thunderhead, and the Thunderhead is this massive artificial intelligence that pretty much governs the world, and you often read from the perspective of the Thunderhead in this series as well, which was completely fascinating. And yeah, honestly, it was the world for me in this. It is extremely compelling. It's very fast paced. I did give the last book in this series 4 stars. It was my least favorite of the trilogy. However, I do still think that this series is worth the read. It absolutely blew my mind. I was hooked, and I think you guys would be as well. Sticking with the young adult, I now present you with The Illuminae Files by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. Now I know that this is like a super popular series and it is always in science fiction recommendations videos. However, I did only read this last year, and I'm kind of building in my channel like a comprehensive guide to all the books and all the genres that I love, so I could not make this video without mentioning The Illuminae Files, and I know there are still a ton of you guys who have not yet read it. So this is a young adult sci-fi series that is told completely in mixed media. I don't listen to audiobooks, but I would definitely recommend that you find a copy of the audiobook to listen along to while you read this. I definitely think that that is the best avenue to go, because with the audio you have a full cast audio and sound effects, but because it is in the audio format, if you don't read along at the same time, you will miss some of the amazing formatting in this book. I definitely think that the audiobook helps with the flow as well. I don't think that I would have enjoyed this series as much had I not listened to the audiobook and read it at the same time. So each book in this series follows two different main characters, but in the first book we start off with Katie and Ezra, who have just broken up when their home planet is attacked by this evil corporation. Katie and Ezra do manage to escape on this fleet of survivor ships. However, the main ship in the fleet is heavily damaged and they are being pursued by an enemy ship that is currently traveling faster than they are and will eventually catch them. One thing that I want to mention about this series first off is that it also has a horror aspect that I did not expect going into this. Now, I never hear people talk about this, and I don't know whether it's because of the format that choose to read this in, whether you go audio or whether you read it physically, but the experience that I had, which was super immersive doing both at the same time, I really felt this, you know, like there's so much anticipation and build up in this story as you are growing closer. There's a series of countdowns in here counting down to different things, but I felt the tension in the pacing of this book, and I do think that it was really well constructed in this way. I love mixed media novels now. Obviously, the thought of reading a mixed media novel is exciting. I do really enjoy them, but just the way that this is comprised as a dossier of things like emails, transcripts, video surveillance footage, I just generally thought the whole composition was really, really well done. If you've read anything from J. Kristoff or Amy Kaufman before, you will know that they are just generally incredibly sarcastic, and I did really enjoy the characters and the dialogue throughout this. I will say that there's not a whole ton of difference in the characters, and J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman do have a tendency to kind of recycle the character archetypes. So I do really enjoy the Aurora cycle by these authors as well. However, the characters are kind of similar to the characters in Illuminae. That being said, I still really love this series. The Illuminae Files is now one of my favorite series of all time. It has really good pacing, is beautifully constructed, there's great banter, some of the plot twists are wild, and yeah, I think you guys will really enjoy this if you haven't picked this up already. Moving on to the only other book in this list that is set in space, we have The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers, which is the first book in the Wayfarers series. Now, this is an adult science fiction series. However, similarly to the Illuminae Files, each book in this series follows a different set of main characters. I'm not sure which my favorite book in this series is. I think it could be the first one, but I did thoroughly enjoy all of them. So in this one in particular, we follow a woman who is from Mars. This is set in a future where humans have been in space for a long time, and Rosemary is from Mars and she is joining the crew of the Wayfarer. The Wayfarer is a tunneling ship, and the job of the Wayfarer is to punch holes through space so that other people can travel through space more quickly. So the crew of the Wayfarer I just absolutely love. They are comprised of all different species from around the galaxy, because as I mentioned, space travel etc. has been a thing that has happened for a while in this series. But I just really loved the imagination of Becky Chambers in this series, because we have a very diverse cast of characters in here, and what I think this series really illustrates is that the things that we believe or the things that are normal in society have been created by society. Because in this series, Becky Chambers shows us how on different planets people are completely different. Like, one of the planets in here has a group approach to raising children, so they become part of the community and are all raised by one person even though they were born to somebody else. And the series is just full of things like that. I think it really breaks down human society and shows how there are so many other possibilities to live life, but for some reason we all kind of do everything the same way. And when you read it in here, you're like, yeah, that actually is a possibility. Like, why do we do everything the same way? Like, why does everybody pretty much try and live this normal life when there are so many other ways of doing things out there? One thing that I really love about Becky Chambers books as well is that they are incredibly science-based. They do feel quite realistic because she does ground the majority of the things that she mentions in her books in real science in a way that makes it seem so much more realistic. Like, this could be a possible future, and a combination of that plus great character work made me really, really love this series. It is predominantly character driven, however there is a plot in here as well. The crew of the Wayfarer have just been offered the job of a lifetime that will pay really, really well and enable them to upgrade their ships so they can perform bigger jobs, and it is about them traveling from one place to another. It is the long way to a small angry planet so that they can start this job. But yeah, if you like contemporary, actually, if you like modern contemporary with contemporary themes, I think that this may be a science fiction series that you guys enjoy. And the last series I have to talk about today is one that I have read very recently, and it is a very different type of science fiction to the ones I've already talked about, and that is the Villains Duology by V. Schwab, which once again is quite a popular science fiction story. So this book features Victor and Eli, and they are best friends and college roommates, and they are working out how to create extraordinaries, which are people with special abilities. They very quickly discover that the key to this is adrenaline, specifically the adrenaline that goes through your body when you have died and been resuscitated. So they proceed to kill themselves and each other, so trigger warnings for suicide and then also self-harm in here as well. But they proceed to kill themselves and each other to bring themselves back to life so that they can have extraordinary abilities. Now there are two timelines in this book. That is the first one, and the second one is 10 years after that, where Victor has just been released from prison. Him and Eli are now mortal enemies, and Victor has a score to settle with his old best friend. So if you are unfamiliar with sci-fi, I do think that this would be another great one to start with. V. Schwab has a very simple writing style. It's very to the point. It's not all cut and dry. There are quite a few beautiful sentences in here, but in terms of it being easy to understand, it's really, really simple. It is science-based, but it doesn't go into the real deep nitty-gritty of science. It's easy enough to understand if you know nothing about science at all. The thing about this one that I really, really love is the pacing and the characters. There is a lot of grey morality in this series because we are following villains. Not all of the characters are unlikable, but they are all bad or morally questionable people. They will stop at nothing to get what they want, and that is what I really, really loved about this. There's something just quite freeing about reading from the perspective of characters who don't let normal things like the law and what's right or wrong stop them from accomplishing what they want to do. I'm not saying you should live by that code, and I'm not saying that you should want to hurt people to get what you want, but it's nice from time to time to read from the perspective of a character who just doesn't care about that stuff. I do feel like the sequel to this is better. It has a more complex and well-structured plot, and I think the way V. Schwab brought the sequel together was really, really good. But just Victor and Eli, I love them. They're great characters, and the ruthlessness of this story plus the imagination that V. Schwab has put into the powers that all the characters manifest in here, and then how you see like the soft side of some of the characters, because there's more than Victor and Eli in here. There's a dog in here. There's also a little girl who's a main character, and just the motivations as well, the reasons why some of these characters are doing what they're doing. It's great. I was surprised by how much I love not only this duology. This I really loved, but I wasn't particularly emotionally attached, but Vengeful is so good, and I cannot wait for another book to be released in this series, whenever that may be. So there you have it. Those are 5 science fiction recommendations. As I mentioned, there is a whole ton more science fiction that I would like to get to, and fantasy is definitely much more prominent on BookTube than science fiction is, so I do think that I will continue to make follow-up videos, like more sci-fi recommendations, as I continue to read more sci-fi. A big thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. As I mentioned at the top of my description box, there will be a link for you to redeem your 2 months of Skillshare Premium completely free, so please do think about taking me up on that offer. And down in the comments, please let me know if there are any sci-fi books or series that I haven't read that you guys would recommend, because it is a genre that I really would like to explore more, and I can always do with more recommendations. Well, that's it for this video, guys, so please don't forget to like if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna. If you head into my description box, you'll find links to my Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish body butter and candle website, the Instagram for that, and a 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you will go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.